Well, they lost him in '98, sure did. And he won a lot of races with us, and we learned a lot together, man. We burned up some stuff back in the day. But I got a good enough little crowd going here, but let me tell you real quick about some history of the nitrous kit that we have been involved in. In 1978, I had a Chevy van, a new Chevy van, and it was just a regular old Chevy 350. And I called NOS. I saw it in Hot Rod magazine. I called NOS and I said, I want one of those kits to put on my van. And in my van, there was nowhere to put the bottle, the 15-pound bottle, but on the fender, the rear fender in the back. And so I drilled the holes and put my bottle brackets there with the bottle tilted up, and had the nitrous line run across there, and drilled a little hole in the motor cover. You know, the vans had the engine halfway in where your feet were, and we put the little plate under the carburetor, a little stock carburetor on it, and we put that kit on there, and I ran it and ran it and ran it and ran it. I didn't even know how nitrous worked. I just know that when you pushed the button, it was an animal. I mean, even a stock Chevy van with 200 horsepower, man, you'd be driving along about 20 miles an hour and floor it and push that button, and it would light the tires, and I could outrun anything, any tow vehicle at the drag strip, and it created a long line of us having tow truck races, which is a long story in itself. I remember at the end of the tow truck races when some of the guys came out with these elaborate turbos before diesel trucks were cool, but we had all gas trucks. And Mo Parsons had turbo truck, and several guys put turbos on. I had a supercharger on my 454 Chevy dually, and we didn't have good gasoline back then, so I had a MSD timing knob on the dash, and I would turn the timing up or down 15 degrees so you could put the cruise control on and get the supercharger whining. That thing would be pulling up the mountains, pulling a big old heavy fifth wheel trailer behind it, and you could hear if it would start pinging a little bit, you just turn 2 or 3 degrees out and the pinging would go away. And then when you're on level ground and you're trying to go along and enjoy the ride, you know, I could put the timing all the way back up and I'd get good gas mileage. But as soon as you would put a little pressure to it, man, that timing retard distributor only had so much it could do with the cheap octane gasoline. So I bought a big tank to go behind in the bed of the truck. One, it was like a 150-gallon tank. I can't remember. It was really crazy how big that tank was. But we would put good gas in it at home, and it would last for a little while where we could play with the truck with the boost. But back to the story with Mike Thermos and Dale Vazanian at NOS in 1978. They really helped me out. They helped me make my tow truck the fastest. And then we got into turbocharged motorcycles, and those guys were always behind me, always helping me. And when we put a nitrous kit on the Kawasaki Turbo funny bike with nitrous, so we had 120 octane gasoline with a turbo with 25 pounds of boost and a nitrous kit. And we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how it worked. We didn't know why it was fast, but man, oh man, that thing would peg the boost gauge. And I didn't know about turning the timing down. I didn't know about, I would just put enough fuel in it. I would spray fuel and spray nitrous in it. And we had to put enough fuel to it because the boost, we would put it in the carburetor. We put the fuel in the carburetor. We would add a nozzle, a fogger nozzle, not a fogger nozzle, just a single nozzle. And we would spray fuel in, and the turbocharger would grab it and blow it in there. It would spray right into the veins of the turbo. So we'd spray nitrous on it. And a long time later, we found out that if you put the nitrous to it a little bit, you could, on the exhaust side, you could spin the turbo wheel with a nitrous nozzle. It wouldn't even go in the engine, but it would sure bring the boost up fast. So that was something we learned a long time ago. And then, hey, Stacy, hey, Paul, hey, Matt, I just wanted to tell you a really cool story about Dale and Mike at NOS. In 1981, we had a 454 Chevelle, and it was fixed up to look just like a SS396. And I remember it was a 4-speed car, and we put a turbo 400 in it, and it was made for street racing. And it was a really fast 454. It was one like you just buy in a crate back then. I think they were called LS7s or LS6 back then, but they were really powerful. And they had all the good parts. They had forged pistons. They had 7/16 rods with the big bolts. They had steel crank, four bolt mains. And those engines were really stout. And so I called Mike Thermos out at NOS when he was in California, and I said, I want to put nitrous on the Chevelle. So I got this crazy idea to put the nitrous on the Chevelle, to put the switch under the clutch pedal, which I had under, when I put the automatic in it, I had the clutch pedal under the floor mat. So I could push that pedal down and the nitrous would come on. And it was so cool because the UPS man that was delivering all our parts every day, he had the fastest car in Albany, Georgia. And he had a Ford that would outrun everybody. And we were racing for 100, 200. Some Saturday nights we'd run for $500. So I called Mike and Dale and I said, can you guys send it to a friend's house? Send me the nitrous kit in a plain brown box with no labels on it to a friend's house, because the UPS man I was going to race him for $500 delivered the nitrous kit. So what I did, and you got to understand how long ago this was. This was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. I got the big nitrous bottle and put it in the trunk. And I ran a 20-foot -4 line, and I coiled it up in the trunk and put a plug on the end of it, so when you turn the bottle on, it would fill up that 20-foot line. And then when you turn the bottle off in the trunk, you cut the line loose with a 9/16 wrench, and that line would drain out and it would go pshh, and you could hear the nitrous go out. So I had 2 motorcycle bottles, the 2 5-pound bottles in the back seat. I'm talking about in the coil springs with -3 hoses and a T, and I ran it down and I ran it all the way under the car to the front and came up firewall right behind the distributor, and we put rubber hose over that line all the way from the front to the back. And then we put the nozzle going to the plate. We painted everything black. We painted all the lines black. We covered up everything with hoses and electrical tape. And I had 10-pound bottles, 2 5-pounders inside the back seat that you couldn't see. If you went under the car, in the trunk, in the back, you couldn't find it. So when we got to Albany that night to race, the guys all at the nightclub there they were all hanging out. They said, we're going to run, and we're going to run. We heard you got nitro on your car. You got nitro on your car. I said, no, I don't. And they said, we can smell it on the exhaust. I said, how do you smell it? And they said, you can smell it on the car, but it wasn't. It was just regular racing gas. So the guy said, we'll bet you $500 cash if you open the trunk and let us take the bottle out. And I said, I don't have a bottle. And they said, yes, you got a bottle. I said, okay, cash on the barrel. Yes. So I got my 500 out. They got their 500 out. We opened the trunk. Sure enough, in its glory, it's this 15-pound blue bottle sitting in the trunk. And I said, do you want to hold it? Or, yeah, we want to hold it. So I took the lines loose, the clamps loose, and I turned the bottle off. And then I took my 9/16 wrench and I cut the hose loose, and it says, psh. And then and everybody started hollering, yeah, we got it, man, we got it. Anyway, we pulled the bottle out and handed it to them. And we went out and ran, and we took off going down the street, and it was a back road, of course, and there was a good crowd watching. This is back 40 years ago. I'm sure it was highly illegal, but nothing like you hear about today. But the drag strips just weren't at the same place they are today where you could go and run like that. But anyway, 40 years ago, we were doing this, and the guy would come up close to me, and I touched the clutch pedal, and it would go, whoa, and I put a car length on him. He'd come up a little closer, I'd go, well, I touched the clutch pedal, and I just stay a car on him for the whole run, and I ended up winning and taking the $500 home. But what I didn't know was, if I'd have just pulled a little timing out, if I'd have just got the air fuel right, and 40 years ago, that was all just a guess, right? So now, 40 years later, here I am with this vapor trail coming out behind me for 40 years of burning up pistons. Burning up pistons. I'm talking about cast pistons. I smoke them, bust them. 3042 forged pistons. They weren't we didn't have hyper-eutectic then, which were just hard cast pistons in my opinion. But then in 1983, Wiseco got this crazy deal, and some of the other companies, the California companies had it. Benolia, Arias, some of the other California companies 38 years ago had 2618 alloy, which was called the California alloy. Well, Wiseco got it, and Jackie and I went to Mentor, Ohio, and we became Wiseco distributors. It's a cool story now because we were there one night after work, and at the very back, their company, the Wiseco factory, was up against a railroad track, and they opened up the big back door, and there's the railroad tracks, and they had railroad cars, and in the cars was bar of 2-inch Alcoa. They had bar stock of 4032. They had this new 2618, and they showed us how they made the forgings. And I'm telling you, man, when you got these 2 kids 40 years ago, I mean, we were youngins and so excited about it. And what they would do is they would bring these big bars in through the back door at Wiseco, and they put them in a saw, and they cut them off in these 2-inch pucks, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And then they had these Ajax machines, these stamps, these big giant forging stamps. And I know this is no news to you guys that have been to the piston factories, but I was in my 20s and Jackie was in her 20s, and we were like freaking out. So what they did was they took this little puck of 2 by 2 alloy, and they put it in this machine, and it got it really hot, and I think this piece was glowing, and then it had like a 20-foot ram, maybe 10-foot. But the Ajax machines were so tall, and they would push a button, and this big ram would come down, and it would bam, and it would hit that piece of aluminum alloy and turn it into a piston. And that was a forged piston. I mean, the inside stamp looked like the inside of the piston, and the outside stamp looked like the outside of the piston. Of course, the piece had to be completely machined inside and out. Well, the inside didn't have to be machined because they had the stamp. And back in the day, back then 30, 40 years ago, whenever you wanted a trick piston, they had to build a new tool that would go on this Ajax stamp to hammer this piston into the shape of the piston you wanted. So a lot of pistons were the same forging, turned down to a little piston, turned thick for a big piston, and then they go in and mill the inside out to get the piston thickness you wanted. Nowadays there's hundreds of forgings and also billet pistons now. But back then, in 1983, Wiseco came out with this new piston, the 2618 alloy, and they said, you put these in your turbo bike. They're soft, but they won't break. We were blowing the ringlands on the 4032 forged pistons. We would break the second ringland. I mean, just break it off. It would just fail because we were detonating. We were running high octane gasoline, turbocharged with 2 stages of nitrous on our Suzuki Turbo. I didn't know about timing yet. I didn't know about air fuel yet. So it was a great learning experience for us because we instantly picked up power because we weren't breaking the pistons all the time. And it was a good learning experience for you. But the 2618 alloy, the reason I know about nitrous oxide, even though I'm not famous for nitrous oxide, I am, inside my family and my team, I am famous for how many pistons I burned up, how many head gaskets I blew, how many rods I broke, how many engines I destroyed, how many sets of Suzuki cases and Kawasaki cases I destroyed learning this stuff because I didn't know that it was the gasoline. Listen to me, the gasoline is what made the power, not the nitrous oxide. It wasn't the turbocharger that made the power, it was the gasoline. I didn't know that all I was trying to do was burn more gasoline. Well, that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. And I'm going to flip over to the screen because I know you're tired of looking at me. But I want to tell you a couple things. There's a lot of numbers that are confusing in the world today. A lot of ratios, 13:2, 13:0, 12.5, 14.7, compression ratios, 14:1, 13:1, 12:1, 11:1. I'm going to break it down for you a little bit. I want to tell you that it's just an accident, it's a coincidence that 14.7 is the air-fuel ratio gasoline wants to be at for perfect power. Not perfect power. It's the most complete burn. The air-fuel ratio, 14.7 to 1. That's stoichiometric for most gasoline. 14.7 is also the pressure of 1 bar. And if you've ever shopped around, messed with turbos and stuff, you know about a 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar sensors. Those are sensors that can handle atmosphere pressure. Like 2 bars is 14.7 times 2. 3 bars is 3 times 14.7. So that's what the bars are. That's 1 bar. And by no relation whatsoever, it just happens to be the right number for air-fuel ratio. So when you hear people talk about 14.7, that's also 2992 barometer. 2992 barometer, 1 bar, and stoichiometric on gasoline is all the same number and pressure. Isn't that crazy? And then over here I want to tell you about N2O. That's the nitrous. That's 2 atoms of nitrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist. And also I know H2O is 2 hydrocarbons and 1 oxygen atom to make water. H2O, N2O, and then they got a new thing now that you can get that we just got because I'm retired now and I get to do this, and it's called HBO Max. And what that is when you have too much, you have the maximum amount of nitrous, and then you have the maximum amount of water, and you have the maximum amount of power. You can also get maximum amount of TV, and it's called HBO Max. That's supposed to be a little bit funny. I don't know if you'll laugh at me, but that's what it is. Now, these ratios we were talking about, air-fuel ratios, people make most power at 13.2, 13.0, 12.5. Everybody's got an opinion. Compression ratios, me and you hear about them, see them, talk about them all the time. 14-to-1 compression ratio, 13-to-1 compression ratio, 12-to-1 compression ratio, 11-to-1, 10-to-1 compression ratios. Now, nitrous oxide, it's 2 parts nitrogen, 1 part oxygen. And when I say part, I'm trying to say atoms. Let me lower this a little bit so I can get down here to it. Try not to mess this thing up, because I'm actually doing pretty good right here. Oh, man. Okay, be patient with me. All right. Nitrous oxide. It makes more power because we add oxygen to the fuel. Why don't we just ingest or inject straight oxygen into the engine rather than N2O? Well, straight oxygen is very, very dangerous. It has uncontrolled combustion. If you put it in the engine, it would light off with just a hint of heat. What's cool about nitrous oxide is it takes a lot of heat to break these atoms apart. Matter of fact, this N2O deal, it has to get up to about 500 degrees before these atoms will break apart. And I just read about this, so I'm learning about it. I don't know how to teach it as good. But what I want is cool about it is think about it. It will not explode. It's not an explosive. It's not a fuel. It is just a gas, and it allows us to add 35% more oxygen to the engine than we would without nitrous oxide. So if we can put enough fuel to that at a ratio that's happy, gasoline's happy to run on, the engine's happy to run on, we can make a ton of power by adding more oxygen, more O2, more fuel, which is how we run the nitrous. And then there's a ignition timing thing we have to work on, and an air-fuel ratio deal we have to talk on. And I want to tell you about that real quick. I don't want to take up too much time on this, but turbocharged, superchargers, and bigger cams, higher flowing heads are all ways to trap more oxygen into your engine. The nitrous kits is about the quickest way you can do it, because you spray in a little N2O and you spray in a little gasoline and light it, and bang, it makes big power. Another thing that happens really cool with nitrous oxide is it boils at 130 degrees below zero. It boils at 130 degrees below zero. So when it boils and it goes from a liquid to a gas, it pulls so much heat out of the intake, which adds a ton of power by itself. And there's just an old formula that I've proven to be pretty true, is you get 1% power gain with every 10 degrees of inlet temperature drop. So if it's 100 degrees outside and you ever wonder why you slowed down and you have to turn a couple degrees of timing in, you got to put a smaller jet in, you got to put a bigger sprocket on the back because it's 100 degrees outside, it's because you lost a lot of horsepower. If you have 200 horse, say, in your Busa or your Harley or whatever, and it goes down 40 degrees, what's that? That's 4% fuel, 4% horsepower gone. Every 10 degrees of temperature, you lose 1% horsepower. Nitrous lowers the temperature, and it also introduces oxygen, which just allows us to burn more fuel. Now, the reason we have to turn the timing down, when we light off this is TDC, and this is bottom, and this is 90 after top. When we light our spark plug, it's almost always in this area before top dead center. Our spark, we light it off 30 before, 35 before, 25 before, but most of the time we light our spark plug in here. And you got to remember why we do that. Why do we light it off over here? We light it off over here so it makes the most pressure over here. We want peak pressure after the piston starts going down. And the piston's going down, the rod's getting at a good angle to rotate the crank. So we need peak pressure after TDC. If you put nitrous in it, add a bunch of oxygen, add a bunch of fuel, and you don't turn the timing down to light it later, this big pressure lights off sooner, and it tries to blow the head off, tries to blow the head gasket out. So you have to turn the timing down. Two things: more nitrous oxide, more fuel. You're going to have to run it lower ignition timing, because the pressure happens sooner, because the gasoline in the nitrous burns quicker than it does without the nitrous. The gasoline burns slower without the nitrous because the oxygen accelerates the burn. You put a lot of fuel in there and then you stuff it full of oxygen, 35% more oxygen than you get without the nitrous oxide. All of a sudden, this fuel just makes big boom quick. So instead of lighting it at 30 before, you might have to light it at 20 before. And some of the really fast Pro Mod bikes and Pro Mod cars are running closer to top dead center with their timing. They're running 5 or 10 before top. And there's even some guys out there with 5 systems on that even run the timing a little further that way of TDC than they want to talk about. It's pretty crazy. But back to the deal about the other thing you do with the nitrous is you add octane, because octane slows down the burn. If you have 91 octane, it lights off quick and it makes a lot of power soon. But you want it to make more power longer so that it turns the crankshaft harder. So what's really cool is if you buy some nice gasoline, like some 110 or some 120 or some 116 or something like that, some gasoline that has some really good octane, which means it burns a little slower. It doesn't make more power. It just has a more controllable burn rate when you put a bunch of oxygen and a bunch of fuel to it. So remember, turn the timing down a little bit, and remember, add some octane. Now, last thing, guys want to use the gasoline with oxygenated gas in it. They want to use some kind of a Q or some kind of C or something that's got fuel in it, some MR. It's got oxygen. It's got O2 in it. That's great if you're not running nitrous oxide. If you're not running nitrous oxide, get you some oxygenated fuel to add 1 or 2 or 10% of oxygen to your fuel. So when it burns, you make a little bit more power. But you're never going to beat the power that you get from, beat the oxygen content you're going to get from adding nitrous, because it puts 35% more oxygen in. Now, why would a man want to run an oxygenated fuel with nitrous oxide? In my opinion, I wouldn't, because if you want a little more O2, put a bigger nitrous jet in it. If you put a bigger nitrous jet in it, it's going to get a little bit leaner, so you add more fuel. And then the other thing I hear people talking about, I had to turn the timing down, and if I do this and if I do that and if I put water injection on, I can turn the timing back up. Listen to me, y'all. More timing is not the goal. You want to make more power, put more nitrous and more fuel. If you're going to burn it up, that means it's too lean. If you're going to burn it up, the timing's too high. But that's not how you make more power, by adding timing. When a man says, it's running rich so I can add some timing to it, I'm sorry. That's just an opinion. A person doesn't understand how the chemicals work. You want the air-fuel ratio to be right so the burn rate is right. You want the timing to be lit off at the right time so the pressure happens at the right time. You want peak cylinder pressure at the right time, after TDC. You want the right air-fuel ratio by adding more air and more fuel to get the right ratio. Back to air-fuel ratios, several different ones. Without nitrous, people run 13.2 to make more power, 13.1, 12.5. Me, whatever gasoline I'm using, say C16, it really likes to be running at wide open throttle between 13.0 and 12.5 to make maximum power. So we add enough fuel, we add enough nitrous until we get the air-fuel ratio right, and then we adjust the timing till it goes really fast. And the reason some of these numbers are very confusing, like I said, is the 14.7 is similar to some other numbers like that. The compression ratios, 14-1, 12-1, 13-1, 11-1, 10-1, these are compression ratios. These don't have anything to do with air-fuel ratios. So when a guy's talking to you about what ratio you're going to run on the air-fuel, what ratio you're going to run on the compression ratio, it's easy to get confused. There's one more number that is very famous nowadays that people get confused about, and it is the nitrous to fuel ratio. It is not air-fuel ratio. Air-fuel ratio is how much oxygen and how much fuel. Makes 12-1, 11-1, 12-1. With a nitrous to fuel ratio is how many pounds of nitrous oxide are you using in a run versus how many pounds of fuel you're using in a run. And that is a safe number between 7.5 to 8.5 to 1. Some people get away with, they want more fuel, so they'll run 6 to 1. Some people want more nitrous, they'll run 9 to 1. But this is a really safe range. And how do you get, this is what Steve Johnson does for a living. When you send your nitrous kit to Steve Johnson at Induction Solutions, he will flow your kit. He will measure your nitrous poundage in so many seconds, and he will measure your fuel poundage in so many seconds, and he will set up your jetting and your bottle pressure to help you get the correct nitrous to fuel ratio. That's in pounds, okay? That's another story that's going to come out another day. But I want to tell you about wide bands and narrow bands O2s before I'm running out of time, and that's happening fast. A narrow band O2 sensor is what comes in your motorcycle, your car, stock. It only tells you if it's right or wrong. A narrow band means it only measures between 0.3 and 0.6, maybe. That's just a range, 0.3 of a volt. And it's supposed to run on 0.45 volts. If it's lean, it's going to be down here. And if it's rich, it's going to be up here. But these right here, in 1 second, these are how many times it turns the fuel on and off. The injector, on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, because it's wrong. It doesn't stay alone. In other words, when you're riding your motorcycle down the road with the narrow bands in your stock pipes or your D&D or any pipe you got on there, your Burns or whatever, you got narrow bands, talking to your ECU, it is only saying on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. It is not tuning your motorcycle. It doesn't do it. Yes, it has a memory in there. Yes, you can change some pieces, and over time it will only get it to this. It will only get it to the 14.7 stoke number, and that's at part throttle. As soon as this thing continuously goes out of the window, it will just say, I'm not doing anything else. I don't care. It's okay. You're burning it up. You're running it lean. You're running it rich, whatever. If you get a wide band, it measures. Get a wide band and the right electronics to go with it. Many of them are for sale today. It measures from 10-to-1 air fuel to 20-to-1 air fuel, and we grab a little spot in the middle where we would like to monitor it will monitor our air fuel ratio while we're going down the road or down the track. And if it goes a little bit lean or a little bit rich, we go back with the ECU and we tune it, and we add fuel here, take away fuel here, we add fuel here, we take away fuel here. Or if you have a closed loop, and my little closed loop, there are plenty of good closed loops now that you can run it on, like the Max ECU, where you can tell it, I want 13-to-1, and the Max ECU will adjust it accordingly. It'll add fuel here, take away fuel here, add fuel here, take away fuel here. Now, this voltage number, 1 to 5 volts, doesn't have anything to do with that, but there is a scale where 5 volts means 20-to-1, 1 volt might mean 10-to-1, and somewhere in here might be the correct number that you're looking for. But that's a really fast-moving talk about how some of that stuff works. Thank you guys for watching. God bless. Take care of each other. I'll be back next Tuesday. I think this is either 79 or 80. I can't remember. But it's a Tech Talk Tuesday. Somebody tell me what it is before we hang up. Tech Talk Tuesday. What number is it? Somebody tell me, please. Let's see how far behind we are, guys. Come on. Give me a number. 79 or 80. Which one is it? Hello, brother. Hey, Reggie. Hey, Jim. Riddell. Tell me the number. Is it 79, Tech Talk 79 or Tech Talk 80? Which one is it? Van. Y'all come on. Tell me the number. I think it takes 25 or 30 seconds. 79. Bang. Bruno, you the man. Thank y'all. God bless. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.